All right, we are live, and today I have the illustrious Steve from Southern Law. How are you doing?
All right.
And then I have again, I haven't seen her for a while, but Lisa from the Manson cases.
Well, hello, everyone.
And I did want to introduce you, Steve. Steve, what got you into the whole Manson cases?
What got me into it was I was watching the Depp coverage, and then as that was coming to a close, I saw some of this Manson stuff, and people were like, "Oh, it's the same as Depp." And I read the lawsuit by his attorneys against Wood and Gore, and I thought, no, this is a far more complicated strategy that they're putting out there than Depp chose to do. And of course, he's got lawsuits against him. So the first video I made on it was to try and explain this is going to go very differently than the Depp thing, which Depp was pretty straightforward in terms of the legal part. It went to court. They had a trial. Everybody watched it. It was very entertaining. And it certainly convinced me. I didn't know whether I believed Depp or heard or whatever until I watched the evidence. So I enjoyed the trial, but I thought from a legal standpoint, this is going to go very differently. And then people started commenting on it. And I've said before, I think the people that are pro Manson and also that are against Manson have a different vibe to them than some other cases I've talked about. And people seem to be more open-minded and willing to talk to you about the case than some of the other ones where they just want to rant at you. So I enjoyed it and then got more and more into it. And I'm not at the level that Lisa is in terms of knowing the case stuff, but I've read a lot more than I ever planned to on it.
Well, one thing that I really want to compliment you about is you seem to be the one figure involved that everybody's pretty cool with, be it they're pro Manson or anti Manson. I think everyone sees you as possibly the most neutral observer. And do you actively try to cultivate that, or is that just coming naturally?
Well, to some degree, I do try to do that because my view of the facts is not any different than anyone else's. And if I bring something to the game, it's legal analysis. It's reading the stuff and trying to explain to people, well, here's what's happening here. And I can appreciate the craft of the lawyers on both sides, what they're trying to do for their clients. And plus, I don't know Manson or any of the other people involved in it,
Sure.
so I don't know who's done what, and we're not at any trial stage. So I may have some personal theories, but I don't have the evidence. So I try to be modest in my opinion of the facts because I may be able to read the law faster than somebody who's not trained in it. That doesn't make me able to know what the truth is better than anyone else.
One more, and I'm not trying to shut Lisa out, but is this a wild ride in comparison to what you've seen in your career or what you've read?
Well, not in comparison to career, but it is. I knew it was going to be complicated when I got into it, and that's why I was interested in what his attorneys were doing with the strategy they had in the case against Wood Gore. Now, what is kind of surprising about it is I've warned people on both sides that you're going to have good days and bad days for your quote unquote side. That's the nature of litigation. And however, you're also generally going to have long lulls because these things last for sometimes years. And these cases seem to having things just happen. And I'm like, okay, I won't make any more videos about this stuff for like a month, but then something gets dismissed or someone does something crazy. So the level of activity to me is kind of surprising, just so much stuff going on in the cases, but not the things other than the Smith line case is the outlier for me. In some of the bizarre things that have gone on with that. I have never seen an attorney fired by video showing an oven before. So that's a new one.
Well, and you set me straight actually a little bit because you had made the argument on the side. I don't know if I talked with you at all, but it was like, oh, good point. When I think it was you who said, yeah, when there's two people in an attorney-client relationship, one of them is allowed to talk about it and the other one is not. And so he really could not defend himself in any way publicly. And Ashley Morgan Smithline could say whatever the hell she wanted to because she was a client.
Well, and putting myself in his shoes, if that goes terminal, I would want that just over with as fast as possible because like you just said there, the client can do whatever they want. You can't necessarily do that. You can't even say to the court necessarily everything that you'd want to say. So usually when you try to withdraw, they don't want to inquire into that too deeply, especially if the client agrees, because there's an attorney-client privilege there, and if it's broken down, you need to let the lawyer out if that's what everybody wants. And of course, eventually that did happen, but getting fired by text, I would have some concerns like he did, because she has said previously, hey, people hack my phone and they hack my accounts and they sound like me. How does he know that's actually her or not? So I could imagine her frustration with litigation and fear of it and anxiety over it, having to come to this deposition. And if you can't get your mind over that, withdrawing is probably the right thing to do. How that exploded, though, was just crazy. That was, of course, ultimately very bananas.
Yeah, it was insane. And fortunately, Lisa has been providing a whole lot of the documents at hand and kind of keeping up with it. I can't even keep up with this. I'm much more of a dilettante. I go this subject, others, depending completely on Lisa, on your work, everybody else. Want to give the credit. Part of the reason we're doing this today is A, it's Marilyn Manson's birthday, and B, Lisa is launching her YouTube channel tomorrow.
Yes,
So her first video will be coming out tomorrow, and I think you're talking about doing it on Fridays. How's that all going to work?
Well, the way I'm thinking about doing it is to post it at 6 or 7 o'clock, probably bi-weekly, to kind of keep up with the podcast. So if you listen to the podcast, think of the podcast kind of like a primer with the YouTube having extras to it.
Okay. Sounds good. Is it going to cover the same subject, like the podcast is a lead in and then YouTube? And I ask this because there are people, and this is me advising you as a creator, there are a lot of people who listen to this show that I'm doing right now. Even though it's on YouTube, a lot of people listen to YouTube videos, and you may want to still release your YouTube videos as a podcast, or consider just doing one and putting it out in 2 formats.
Yeah, so let me explain. I think the only difference is, for example, my podcast episode already came out on Monday. Add a few more things to it, and that's it. So all I'm taking is that audio, adding maybe a few more things that maybe a YouTube viewer might want to see, or have a different introduction, or a little bit more spiciness to it, so people will pay attention.
Okay. Spiciness to it. Trust me, spiciness is good for podcasts too.
Yeah.
I promise.
Well, what I mean by spicy is maybe something that you need to visually see that I can't always explain on a podcast. So the difference is time-wise is maybe there's an extra 5 to 10 minutes on a YouTube versus the podcast.
Okay. Well, either way, folks, you can click her. You should be able to click her name in the description. And if you don't mind, do that. And let me know in the chat if it's not working or something. So that way people can subscribe ahead and get notified when the video comes out. It's very hard to build up the initial audience, and it really, really does help a ton. So what? Okay, I got a list, my cheater list of everything that's coming up and has come up lately. What, between the two of you, what is the most important thing going on right now with the cases?
I'll go first if you don't mind, Steve.
Sure.
I think the biggest thing everyone is waiting on is the never-ending anti-SLAPP motions in the Manson v. Wood-Gore case, because it will change the direction of the lawsuit, or even put it on hold for a possible appeal, no matter which way it goes. Because in the state of California, if, let's say Manson side doesn't get what they want, they can appeal while the case is still going on, and that'll sit there for a while.
Okay. And on that, and I guess this is great having you here, Steve. What are the odds on this, and have your opinion shifted over time? Do you feel like they're going to get their slaps or anti-SLAPP motions, or do you think that Howard King and Manson can prevail in their cases?
So first I'd say, I'm a tourist when it comes to California law, because I'm licensed in North Carolina, not California. So there are people who know it better than I do, and I'm not used to the SLAPP stuff. But reading what the court wrote on the discovery ruling, I think was a lead into what her thinking is going to be on her anti-SLAPP ruling. And that to me looked a lot more like that she was willing to discharge some of Manson's claims out of the lawsuit than I would expect in normal civil litigation. For example, the FBI letter, she seemed prepared to strike that unless Manson could come forward with evidence that it was used outside the child custody litigation and actually used in some format against Manson. And normally that stuff would just be in the lawsuit. So she expressed skepticism over that. She said in her discovery ruling that she didn't think that the comments about to the potential accusers were pressuring enough to be extreme and outrageous conduct for intentional infliction of emotional distress. So that also could be tossed out. And then of the 3 speech-related things on the IIED claim, the third one was the groupie stuff. And the judge expressed skepticism that Wood was alleged in well enough to be held for conspiracy, and then also did allow discovery on the one element of Gore's state of mind for the groupie comments. So that, to me, indicated a willingness to potentially get rid of some of this stuff out of the lawsuit more than you would normally see. Now, it wouldn't cancel the lawsuit because there are large portions of the lawsuit are not subject to the motion to strike. But either way, as Lisa said, whoever doesn't win in an anti-SLAPP motion, either side, they can appeal as soon as the judge rules. And so probably that's going to happen. And then this case goes on ice for a while. But it will be interesting, certainly for me, educational, to read what the judge does on this. I think she's a very sensible person from my research on what she has said about things like that. But they're more aggressive in California at potentially throwing these things out. And I guess that's why maybe Depp came to Virginia when he had the chance.
Oh, sure. Well, he also came to Virginia because of I forgot, Nate was telling me the other term for it, but defamation per se being available here in Virginia. And that is very useful, plus slightly different environment. I mean, keep in mind, and
great
has to be troublesome for Manson, in my opinion, that the Phoenix Act, a state law in California of all places, and the person involved or at the focus of said act is Evan Rachel Wood. So there's a definite political impetus to protect the person, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, sometimes if you're a Manson person, probably you feel like these laws are directed straight at your guy, right? And changing the statutes and limitations and things like that. So I get that. And she was, of course, very prominent on that. Of course, she has not filed a claim against a Manson, and it remains to be seen whether that occurs or not. Just the people in orbit around her have done that.
Which is very interesting. And that was one of the questions I had for you. And I want to get Lisa's input too. I get the impression that the judge may be allowing a little bit more of an attack on Ashley Gore, aka Elma Gore, over Evan Rachel Wood. Like, I could almost see the cases being split out where ERW kind of slides out and Ashley takes the hit. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, if the conspiracy angle is viewed as too weak by the judge, that's a big win for Wood, because a lot of the actual things that occurred were done by Gore. I mean, she was kind of the workhorse in this. And the allegation is that she made the fake emails impersonating Manson, that she hacked into his accounts, that she made the calls to these accusers, that she made the comments about groupie. So if you're Gore, you could be left out there alone potentially if the judge doesn't buy the conspiracy angle. I think alone. I don't really know the state of relationship with Gore to Wood. I don't think it's good, but I don't know that.
Yeah. Now, Lisa, you've been following it for a while, and from what I remember, and I just want to make sure I get it right, Elma Gore really has not denied that was her broken iPad or her, I'll just say, for lack of better words, work product, which is kind of ironic. And if I recall, in a tweet she even put out and said, hey, that's copyrighted material.
Right. And in recent filings, we saw paperwork, and I can't remember if it's from Elma Gore's side, that shows exchanges where she's trying to get this broken iPad back from her sister, Brighton Gore. So there is confirmation it was her broken iPad. And we also have a new declaration in, I believe, November with the anti-slaps of a computer forensics expert. And if you look at the dates of this lawyer trying to get Elma Gore's broken iPad back, it's even right before they image the broken iPad in March 2022. And this is only a few weeks after Marilyn Manson files his lawsuit. So little by little, we get more breadcrumbs But kind of as Steve said, at some point this is going to stall, or we're not going to see much for a while.
Right. But then now that's where we have, and I mean, should we shift on to Esme Bianco, who, I feel like is also in news lately because of Ashley Morgan Smith line. They're so tied together. And the revelation, I guess, of Manson's attorneys that they are, in fact, communicating with the police, and there is supposed to be a criminal investigation of Manson right now, or am I misrepresenting something?
Let me explain it. So there already has been a criminal investigation going on for more than 19 months. Back in September, the LASD announced that they gave their investigation results to the LADA, and they came out and said, no, we only have a partial. So that is still in the LADA's hands. And in Blair Burke's recent declaration, which is on Manson's side, she states she called the LADA back in November, and they're still sitting on it, I guess, trying to make a decision for criminal charges. And that's where Esme Bianco comes into play right now, because she's suing for, I don't know the exact act, but it's for trafficking. And there's a provision that states if there is an ongoing investigation that relates directly, I guess, to her claims, she's a complaining witness, the timeframes match, well, they have to put a stay to that case and put it on ice until the investigation's concluded. So that's what's playing out right now this month. And we're waiting for a judge to make a ruling on that. So that might also be put on hold.
All right. Now, Steve, I'm not an expert on it, but the whole trafficking charge is extraordinary, in my opinion. I've not heard of, now I do know that there is a methodology. There are some people have brought in people from, say, Eastern Europe or whatever, giving them a fake work visa coming in. When they get here, then they take their IDs away and they're trapped. And I'm not trying to downplay it. The circumstances described, though, of dating somebody, sending them a ticket to work on a job, and I imagine it doesn't sound like the normal trafficking to me, but again, I'm not an expert. I'm just curious your thoughts.
So, some of these cases are in state court in California and some are in federal court. And one of the reasons for that is obviously back when they were filing these, the statute of limitations hadn't been changed yet. So you had some of these people saying, oh, I just realized that I was abused. Right. And then in Bianco's case, you had her saying, well, I've been too afraid to sue. But one of the things her attorney did was use the federal civil cause of action for trafficking because it had a 10-year statute of limitations. And because it's a federal claim, that will put it into federal court. So you maneuver the facts to fit that, and now you get this first-class plane ticket that you're flying over here. I mean, I wouldn't have kind things to say about what I think about whether that fits human trafficking or not, irrespective of whether she was abused by Manson. But I understand why he did it, which is to get the case outside of a statute of limitations in some way. And of course, that federal judge ended up saying, well, we'll consider it a factual issue whether she was too afraid to file these state-based causes of action. And now the statute of limitations, I don't think it matters anymore. But they are where they are, which is in federal court. The downside to that, though, is this other provision that Lisa was talking about, that for this cause of action, human trafficking, it will be stayed if there's a criminal action going on. And the definition of that includes investigation, can include prosecution. And Bianco's lawyer has tried to make it a Schrodinger's case where it's neither, that it's in this box between the sheriff's department and the DA, like it's stuck at a FedEx truck somewhere. So it's neither under investigation nor being considered for charges or being charged. It's just in the ether somewhere. That's not persuasive to me. Now,
no, that's a huge problem. And I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
but
go ahead. Yeah.
Can that not lead into a Bill Cosby situation? Is what I was thinking, because in a civil court case, you can't just say, I refuse to testify. You can be compelled. You have to testify. And if that's used against you criminally, now we've got a rights problem. Or am I misrepresenting?
So if you are in a civil case and you don't want to testify because of the Fifth Amendment, you can do that. You can refuse to testify, but in a civil case, there can be a negative inference given that you refuse to testify. That can be used against you in a civil case. So they can't make you testify in a civil case. And so sometimes in this state, we've had several large or big media cases where civil actions ran contemporaneous with criminal investigations or actions to try and force that result, either a default judgment against the defendant or to get them in a position where they have to testify. So it can be a coordinated strategy, but at least for this federal cause of action, the idea was the government would be the beneficiary of this because it would stop the case while the government decided whether to pursue criminal charges. But it's not written like that. It includes, it just says the case will be stayed. So courts have said they're not going to let defendants come in and say, I might be under investigation. Let's just take a time out until because sometimes the FBI won't even tell you if you're under investigation. They have to prove it to the court. I'm under a criminal investigation here to invoke this statute. And so if you come too early to the court, you could have your stay denied. So Manson's team is saying, look, we've checked into this and we think we have enough now to show you court. This is clearly in the criminal side at the state level involving the same facts to stay this case. I think Manson wins this case. The old college try by Bianco's attorney to try and find the Schrodinger situation where it doesn't exist anywhere, but I don't buy it. It's in the criminal process until something else happens, in my opinion. And so I think he will win that one.
Can I just say that the whole trafficking aspect surrounds her being paid, or I don't know, I shouldn't say paid, but her coming to the UK, to LA to film a music video that never came to light. And she claims specific accusations there, but she claims that she's forced to stay with him and abuses happen. But then she goes home and then starts a relationship with him a few months later for apparently 2 years while she's married and living in the UK. You see what I'm saying? It's like, I just wanted to point that it's there's a lot. Now add all the other cases to that. But that always kind of tripped me up because I'm like, wait a minute. How is she in a long distance relationship while she's married in the UK and then add all this other stuff to it?
Great question. And from the chat, this is, I guess, a big question. How long down the line will the case go to trial? Like, will we be seeing any trial dealing with Manson in 2023?
If this case has stayed, the only one I think that could possibly come up would probably be the Jane Doe thing, if that ever goes anywhere.
Is this Jane Doe 1 or 2? I get confused.
2. So Jane Doe 1 was several years ago, during the beginning of the Me Too movement. So that one's said and done, and nothing ever happened with it.
Okay. And Ashley Walters got tossed and is on appeal.
Mm-hmm.
And Jane Doe 2 refiled. Now, isn't Jane Doe 2 the one who was supposedly 5150'd over Christmas, but text or DMing at the same time? Or is that another Jane Doe?
That is an accuser, but I don't believe it is someone suing.
Okay.
That I believe is Sour Girl or Gabriella. I think they're the same person.
Oh, that's right. Gabriella.
Yeah. So, and then she kind of disappeared after her accusations. But yeah, I think that's her. But yeah, there's a lot of that in the cases like that. A lot of inconsistencies.
Actually, that'll help to clarify. What cases are actually out there and active? I know about Marilyn Manson versus Evan Rachel Wood and Elma Gore, and that is, he's the plaintiff. Then Esme Bianco against Marilyn Manson, she is the plaintiff, and Jane Doe 2 is a plaintiff. Ashley Morgan Smith line got thrown out, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, and Ashley Walters also got thrown out. So so 2 out of the 3 Ashleys are gone.
Right. Well, one's on appeal still until it's actually gone, but yeah.
Oh, okay. So 1.5 was gone because we've still got Ilma, who's Ashley.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Ashley. He's got a problem with Ashley's.
I'm not sure how long appeals take, but that one's just been sitting there since September.
Okay. So is that all the cases then?
Yes.
And everything else is noise and accusations.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. So I guess it does help narrow it down, but I mean, the weight becomes so overwhelming with every voice from these to Jenna Jameson to Corey Feldman to
right.
It's just like everybody's got to get their opinion in. I feel like the court of public opinion is turning, but I'm not sure. I will defer to Steve, who I feel is a more neutral guy, Have you been seeing a shift in the overall narrative or feeling it?
Well, I think so. I think Manson's side has had some good legal results lately. Obviously, his side was feeling down toward the end of last year that this anti-SLAPP stuff was going to happen, and he wouldn't be able to push this, what he's trying to do with Wood and Gore, to show it was a conspiracy against him. However, the year ended and started on a high note for him with these recent developments, with Smithline giving up on her case, at least for now. And for some reason, however they did it, that appeared all over the media, right? Like case dismissed, case thrown out, and an interesting tactic by Manson's team to say, look, we really appreciate that she let this go. There was no settlement here. We wish her well. And it's kind of like, for anybody who wants to surrender and come over to our side, we're not going to come after you. We're going to be nice to you and stuff. So I think he got a lot of positive coverage from the Smithline case ending. It seems to me there is a lot of that. And people are willing to look at this because of the ridiculous notion that believe all women should be insulting to any woman, because that women are independent people and they're capable of anything anyone's capable of. So it's a stupid slogan, but that's also not fair to say believe no women. So I think, Eric, I know you've said before, each case needs to be judged on its own merits, and that's true. But you look at everything through a lens of how you see it and stuff. And I think Manson is having a better time now than he did, say, 6 months to 9 months ago, for sure.
All right. Well, good news. I've got a surprise guest to join us, a real expert.
It's Marilyn Manson. Sorry, wait. What did I miss?
We're just they're trying to get my brain straight around everything, and I'm trying to make sure I'm not spouting off the wrong facts. I was a little bit nervous being on a show yesterday going, oh, let me just state out a bunch of things. I think I said, in my opinion, about 47 times, and just trying to cover myself and get it right. But that's why these two are great. I mean, I got the documentation source completely. You've got the neutral lawyer, and Colonel Kurtz, I think you might agree with this, that Steve may be considered the most neutral person involved in the Manson situation. He seems to be liked by both sides.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. I think so. I think I thought you were going to say he's the best source for legal information in this case. I was going to agree with that too. But yeah,
well, he's a great source, but I don't want to downplay, because Andrea Burkhardt, I think it does.
No, she's great. She has just not been focusing on it. I just want to say, I didn't mean that as a slight against her. Just she hasn't been focusing on it as much, but she's doing some great stuff about the Idaho case right now. So
absolutely,
kudos to her for that.
Yeah, and I don't want to downplay the Manson case, but the Idaho case is a really scary, frightening. I mean, that's just going into full actual darkness.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's who some people think Manson is. That's actually what's kind of funny is they think that he's that kind of at least people who think that he's horrible and definitely guilty and all that think that that's the kind of person he is. When really, yeah, you're right.
Well, it's actually a good analogy, because if we took their pictures and we stuck them side by side and said, "Who's the monster?" What would people answer?
Right.
That's part of, and I don't know, Steve and Lisa, if that's what got you into it. I think you're that way, Colonel Kurtz. The fact that it's counter narrative is interesting to me. That the person who looks like the most scary, the most involved, most evil, whatever, may in fact not be guilty, makes it a more interesting case.
Yeah, I know. I agree with that. Exactly, because it does go against our expectations. And because it was so obvious to a lot of people. I remember when the allegations originally came out, and there were people posting on social media saying, "Oh, he's a wolf in wolf's clothing." Right? And so I think it was because that image was already there, and that persona, and things he had said in interviews and stuff, like he helped to build this, right? That it was so easy then for people, when these allegations came out, just to plug into that. It was just a very like nice prefabricated narrative. And so it is hard to undo that. It really is difficult to undo that.
Yeah, he even wrote a book.
Yeah.
Well, actually, he didn't write a book. Neil Strauss wrote a book. But how many of you have read the book, by the way?
I have.
Have you?
It's the only book I've read and stayed up until like 4 or 5 in the morning ever.
Really?
Did you like it? Did you enjoy it?
I did, but this would have had to been like 2001, 2002, 2003 timeframe. So teenager. And I was just so intrigued because it was so, how do I say it? If you read the book, a lot of it's unbelievable, but that's what was interesting about it. I just couldn't put it down. And I've only read it that one time. And now I got to, read it again to kind of catch up on everything. But it was the only book I remember staying up all night for. And there's one quote in the book that I vaguely remember, and he describes his time in college. And the only thing he learned was how to spell blonde with an E. And I always remember how to spell blonde with an E now. And that's the one thing
there's value in the book.
That's the one thing that stuck from the book. So,
Steve, have you read it?
Only the bad parts.
Oh.
They're sensational for this. So, I did read some of the things people are using against him because I think it's important to know, and it's easy to gloss over that and also easy to make too much out of it. It depends on, like Lisa and I were talking about earlier, the sign, you want to believe, right?
Oh, no. I mean, he sets that up perfectly, but, and that's something I have to work out. I actually was supposed to do it back in September. I got to reconnect everything, but, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Neil Strauss. So ironically, I read Neil Strauss's The Game.
I've read it too.
Several years ago, and he continued to write The Truth. But anyway, that one also is supposed to be pretty similar in terms of a bit of a fabulous tale in many ways. And I've communicated with Ross Jeffries. And if you've read The Game, Ross Jeffries is the OG pickup artist who who trained all of them. And I happen to know him because of the body language stuff and that whole crowd. But he has two identities: Ross Jeffries, who was the pickup guy, whatever. I think he spent 60 minutes and everything doing it. And then he has another name, and it's funny that I forgot his straight name for like the straight sales. But he said that, Neil Strauss, it's essentially fiction, a lot of it. So some is here, some is not. And I think that's a different way to explore that book, because again, we've got the same author, both kind of a dark community, in my opinion. I think the pickup artist community is disgusting. So I'm not a fan of that. I don't like manipulating people and things of that sort. So I'm a little suspect on the book, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think that Neil Strauss has basically now come around to disavow a lot of what he put out there in The Game, because now he's kind of moved on. I know for a while he was espousing the virtues of marriage. Of course, he got a divorce then, but I think that now he's kind of become this sort of like self-help sage. And I like a lot of the stuff that he writes. I follow him on Instagram. You probably do too. And there's some great stuff that he comes up with. So I like this new Neil Strauss a lot better than The Game Neil Strauss. But you're right. When you read The Game, it's pretty obvious that, I'm sorry for the cat in the background.
That's fine.
But when you read The Game, it's obvious that it is a number of things in there are fictionalized. And at least correct me if I'm wrong, because I've only skimmed the Manson book, but weren't there things in the book that were like completely like supernatural, even that just obviously couldn't have happened?
Yeah, and one of them, he was actually on Celebrity Ghost Stories, like however long ago that show was popular, telling it. So I don't know if that's actually a real story or if that's a Marilyn Manson persona story about how him and a friend, I don't know, went into a barn or something. Now, I don't remember everything, and there was some, I don't know, something underground where they opened a door. Like, it was really bizarre, but it was on Celebrity Ghost Stories. So I'm like, well, is it real or is it not? Because usually Celebrity Ghost Stories, they're actually telling their ghost stories. But yeah, he's had some crazy stuff in there. And I do want to point out, before I forget, there's actually a disclaimer in the first few pages of the book talking about composite characters. And people forget that. There's a mix of truth in there. There's a mix of fiction. You know what I'm saying? Like, but we don't know.
Larry King. I think that one of his best interviews I've seen is Larry King.
I saw that. It was a good one. Yeah. It was a good one.
And he did say, and it was interesting because, especially if you saw it, he wasn't toying with Larry King. he was very respectful to Larry King. Like he felt like I'm talking to a legend here, and he didn't mind if Larry King was out of touch or whatever, because he just respected him, and you could feel the respect. But he stated in that interview, some bearing of, that it was a fiction book, that he was building his image. The book helped build said image at that time as well. Now, I haven't read all the book. Okay, I've listened to a third of it or half. I don't know.
I just want to know if the grandfather part is true, because that's actually the thing that creeps me out the most.
I know, right on the beginning too.
It
just goes right into it. I'm like, okay, this is going to be an interesting ride. Oh, good time.
Yeah, can I tell you, I had to been like 17 or 18 reading this book, and that some of the stuff in that book, especially that, was very shocking to me.
Very nauseating.
And I'm a country girl, so I'm like, what? I don't know about a lot of that stuff, especially that age. So it was like, okay.
For people who are wondering, a delicate way to put it would be that he caught his grandfather. His grandfather, at least in the book, he lives in the basement, right? And he caught his grandfather, or he would go down there and like spy on his grandfather, and he saw him late at night doing something alone while watching bestiality porn. And also, like, didn't he have like a voice box? There was some other aspect to it.
His grandfather, yes. Yeah, he had that.
Wasn't there something with stockings too?
Well, there was, his grandfather apparently had AIDS as well, or shall we say, like toys to assist him that Manson got a hold of. It's very disgusting. Okay.
So basically, we need a book club to read this book to everyone.
That's a good idea for a video. I think you could tackle it, Lisa. You've already read it, so.
I have to get it again. I wonder if they have it in my library.
I just want to do a video on the grandfather parts.
The book's online. The book is online for free all over. A lot of PDFs out there.
But I know I came in a little bit late, and you probably already addressed this, but I just wanted to ask, so are you feeling, from Manson's perspective, I should say, because you are unbiased, but from Manson's perspective, are you feeling good about things if you're on his team?
Well, we hit this a little bit, which is, I think, coming into this new year, he's had some really positive results, and his team has combined some good legal stuff with a good PR campaign, in my view. They've gotten into the media a lot in this last week, and they've been very gracious about the Smith line situation. So that's combined with the litigation things that are going on. I think that's good for him. Smith line dropping her case is just good for Manson. If he gets Bianco's case stayed, that's going to be good for him. And really, if the anti-slap goes part his way, or maybe none his way, and it goes off the radar for an appeal for a year, is that really bad for him either? So I don't know that it's not as bad for him as it is, say, 6 months ago, when people were focusing more on the Wood case, and that he may lose most of his case and all that.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to ask you, because like people sometimes, like, my trolls or whatever online will accuse me of not like being just totally up on everything in the legal filings. I'm just going to say I'm absolutely not, right? And so let me just ask you though, there was a period where I felt like there was kind of more pessimism on the Manson side about some of the legal stuff, in terms of I was getting a lot more trolling from the anti-Manson people saying, oh, he's getting all these bad rulings that are against him in court right now, and it's looking bad and everything. What was that about? There was like this pessimistic period. What can you kind of summarize why things were looking down at that point?
Well, for a period of time, he wasn't getting what he wanted when he wanted it in federal court. And of course, they had a sanctions motion against him there, but that ended up resolving in his favor. And then in state court, the judge issued the discovery ruling and didn't give Manson the discovery he wanted almost entirely. He only allowed him to take discovery on the mindset of Gore at the time she made statements about groupies. So those things were all to the negative for Manson. But my view of that is litigation ebbs and flows. It's a long battle. And you can have a good day, and then later on you can have a bad day. And I think Andrea and I joked about this, that there are good times to send your bill out as a lawyer. And right now for Howard King, be a great time to get all bills out, because he's got great results right now. But maybe 4 months ago, I also saw that too, with a lot of pro-Manson people saying, this is terrible. Is the judge biased? What's wrong with this? How can they get away with it? But it's like, just hang on, because you don't know what the ultimate results are going to be, because this is such a long process. And behind the scenes, remember, Heard and Depp, they settled the appeal, right? So that just went away, and that was going to happen. And one day you could wake up and Manson has settled these cases. Who knows, right? For any remaining thing. I mean, maybe not, but they have talked about it. They would love to work it out. And I think that's part of his PR team trying to be gracious for this. Because the Manson allegations to me are very interesting because they are so much in the middle of the Me Too, right? This is a hardcore looking dude. He did do drugs and drink a lot. I mean, none of that's fake, right? And it's hard to think there was never a time when he was with somebody that something happened that a normal person walking by would go, oh, what the hell is going on here, you know? So you can kind of imagine out of that whatever you want. And then from your imagination, there's the proof and then the lack of proof. And the civil system is not the best remedy for finding out the truth. There may be no way to find out the truth. So there is a little bit of what you want to believe in this, I think.
Well, also the chat is, asking, I saw several, and I'm there too. The longer this goes on, the more he doesn't have to deal with it, except for one problem. He's on ice. From what I've seen, nobody's hiring Manson to do shit. He's in the same situation as Johnny Depp. He has no career. He could probably self-publish an album, but it gets to be a bitch because you got to worry about distribution, things like that. And then what if he wants to go on tour? Is he going to be able to get insurance for that? Or is he going to get frozen out? Are there going to be freaking protests everywhere he goes? So he's in a really, really bad spot, in my opinion, right now, as long as all this, shit is hanging over his head. It's a giant, giant issue. So that right there, a settlement is cheap. Like, maybe he won't get a cent for it, but is that what Howard King is doing? Like, he's deliberately made the gracious statement about Ashley Morgan Smith line, like, thank you so much for doing the right thing, etc. And I did hear from her that Howard King is a sweetheart. She doesn't think I'm a sweetheart. She doesn't like me, but she said that Howard King is a sweetheart, as an example. And do you see that possibly happening? Like, is the court of public opinion starting to pivot hard enough to where Evan Rachel Wood no longer has Westworld? She's going to be looking for other gigs now. Does she want her name to continue circling around in this? I'm just throwing it out there to all of you because I don't know.
Well, don't forget, Manson is the one asking for the Bianco case to be stayed, which would put it on ice. So his team maybe see some merit in that. But the points you're bringing up are great points from a practical standpoint. But one great thing about delaying the plaintiff's cases is it makes the settlement more palatable to them. Ellwanger's not getting any check. He's not sending a bill out. I'm sure he's on contingency fee, right? So, and like you say, these people may at some point just go, let's just end this, right? And that's good for Manson if he can do it in a controllable way, because if you're a defense lawyer, which his team largely is, the last thing you want to do, if you can avoid it, is roll the odds in front of a jury. Depp was the exception to that, and every case won't be an exception. So this could be one too, but you can bet his team would like to find some resolution where everybody can go, we worked this out, we paid for therapy and we made a contribution to this, that, or the other, and end all this. So like you said, he can go back to doing what he wants to do without this cloud hanging over there. And maybe he should move away from California because you can get sued there forever for anything you do.
Yeah, let's talk about Romeo and Juliet. What do we have? 55 years.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Well, and I want to say even the Steven Tyler lawsuit, I'm not at all condoning the teenage relationship and everything, and him getting legal guardianship from the parents and all. That's all. There's a lot of some shadiness there. But she decides 50 years, how many years later, that she's going to sue over that. Like I do think that their statutes of limitations are useful, especially when societal mores change. You go back and you look at what was going on in the 70s, and you had, the celebration of even they called them baby groupies, 13 and 14-year-old girls.
Oh yeah, they wrote about it. I mean, there's a whole book about it. Jimmy Page, especially, really.
13-year-old girlfriend.
He better stay in England. I think he did most of his chicanery here, but I'm telling you, Jimmy Page had a rep.
He had a 13-year-old girlfriend, and I'm not at all condoning that, and I think or any of this behavior, but I am saying that as social mores change, then legalities change. But I think this idea of, looking back, especially since he did get her parents' consent. She was, in Steven Tyler's case, she was 13, she was 16 years old. He got the parents' consent, and they even signed over guardianship to him so that he could travel with her from state to state. Again, I get it's sleazy, but why isn't this woman suing her parents? Why is she suing Steven Tyler? Well, we know why. So anyway.
No, I agree, and I mean, Steve, that has to be something you deal with, or have to be concerned with. You have all this history. We're living one way throughout time. The laws are one way throughout time, and then we just say, "Oh, let's rewrite history," because that's in essence kind of what you're doing. It's like, well, wait a minute, it was okay then. So are we now just changing history and saying, no, never mind, we're going after people? It seems capricious.
Well, it does in California to me, but as an East Coast person, a lot of things they do in California seem that way.
Yeah, but hold on. Remember, it's like the weather. Everything starts there and kind of comes across.
Yeah. Well, and in North Carolina, we had a window open for child survivors of sexual assault to file lawsuits, in a year window, and that led to a lot of lawsuits being filed. But aside from that, the statute of limitations is not a holy writ handed down from on high. It wasn't one of the 10 commandments or anything like that. It's just a compromise society makes. But part of that compromise is if you dramatically change it, like they have done here, to like Colonel Kurtz was talking about, you're bringing in a whole different framework of society from the 70s. And it's not like a genocide thing or something like that. This was something that was happening all the time back then. And now you are decades later saying, now we're going to open up civil liability for that. I don't like that very much from a standpoint of stability of the law. It seems unfair. Like, what's the evidence and what's the limiting principle here? What can you change and when? You just change everything. Come on.
Wow. Now to get us back on track, Lisa has been very quiet.
I'm stewing on the statute of limitations talk. I just had a talk with someone on this, and I don't know if it was Steve, but it was someone recently. So that's why I'm like,
Well, I had a talk yesterday on Popcorn Planet about it with Steph. And I felt bad because apparently in England, they don't have a statute of limitations. So she said, hey, I'm coming from a whole different perspective here. Here, we don't have it, and tough shit. I don't care. I'm like, okay, but she has, been a victim herself. I don't know whatever to say on YouTube. I'm always trying to be careful, but she has suffered things in her past, and I never want to be talking to somebody who's suffered, and that's always a very awkward situation.
Well, it's very tricky too, because especially when you play in things like PTSD or memory changes. And that's part of the problem. Now add PTSD or something on it where memory can be affected. So sure. Even in my own experience, when I look at the statute of limitations, with my lens now, I'm thinking there's pluses and minuses. Yes, someone who's like under the age of 18 who now has perspective to understand if something happened that shouldn't have. But also at the same time, if someone's making accusations from 50 years ago, imagine your memory changing in 50 years. There's stuff I don't remember correctly 10 years ago.
Well, let me make
5 minutes ago.
if I can make a point on that, what I'm talking about here, and I think you guys are too, is the civil action statute of limitations. For example, in North Carolina, we don't have a statute of limitations on felonies. So if you sexually abused somebody a long time ago and they can prove it, they could put you in jail for it. But remember, the civil side is one person wants money from another person. And that to me takes it down several notches there. And I'm not going to call it a pure business transaction, but that's what civil court is. And so you put these rules in it, and pulling off a statute of limitations is more of a political statement than it is anything else there. I'm all for punishing people who abuse other people. Do not get me wrong. And I'm all for doing it whenever and wherever you find them. But civil court is a different sort of thing there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was talking about. But yeah, exactly.
So you agree that $500 million for a movie that was 55 years ago might be a tad high?
And they were saying like 2 years ago that how much they enjoyed doing it too. I guess you're aware of this, but Olivia Hussey, like what in 2019, was actually celebrating how cool and edgy it was. And she was like, I didn't even care that I was naked. I forgot I was naked. And the other guy was having a great time. And we were really cool and edgy. And people wouldn't do that now. She was totally celebrating it. And I do think that that should be a factor too in how we think about these things. Because what happened between 2019 and now, that she was an adult in 2019 too, right? So it's not like, oh, I've just grown up now a few years later and I realized. No, there's clearly what's happened is that you thought about it and you've thought about how, well, given this current moment, I think I could get some money. So,
Well, it's like the Nirvana baby.
Yeah.
Remember, every anniversary of the Nirvana Nevermind, he would come forward. It's like, yeah, that was me. Check me out. Hello, hello, hello. This last round, he was saying, that was me. And it was bad.
Yeah.
Pay me. So
pay me a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And the problem is I definitely don't want to be unsympathetic to people who are out there because, as Lisa pointed out, there are mitigating circumstances, especially a child, suppressing things. And I get that. I get that it could take a lot of therapy, a lot of years. You got to be careful with that because you have the McMartin situation, but it can take a long time. I get it. But when it becomes multiples of the person's lifespan at the time of the incident, I start to really wonder. I know it's like she was 16 or 14. I can't remember which.
Olivia Hussey was, I believe they were both 16.
16.
Right?
Okay. So 16, 32, 48. So that's 3.5 lifetimes later. If you just do multiplication, starts to be like, you couldn't come up with it anywhere in between. It just seems odd.
And 500 million. I mean, I know people will ask for a lot to make a point sometimes, but I mean, it seems that we're talking about this movie. In that case, we're not even talking about someone who's, claiming some kind of assault or anything like that, or statutory rape or whatever. We're talking about someone just claiming a bit of exposure. And I get it. She didn't want, now she says she didn't want her breast out there. Although what she's been saying for years is that actually, oh, I loved it. It was great. I didn't even realize I was naked after a while, whatever. But like 500 million, you think that's the right compensation for what happened?
Wait. She's asking for 500.
They're
million?
asking for five. She's suing with the other naked guy. And they're asking for 500 million for a short scene in Romeo and Juliet where you see his buttocks and you see her boobs briefly.
So 50% of Alex Jones is what they're asking.
Yeah,
and I thought that was extreme.
I'm thinking the movie made 500 million. I'm like, wow, that's pretty good for how old that
movie
is.
No. That movie did not make 500 million. I don't even think if you set the, how much money was worth at the time to now, I don't think that movie ever made. That was an arty movie from Europe. I
think it's mostly been played in high schools since then, right?
Yes. And I distinctly remember that from high school. So
I strangely do not remember the nudity scenes, but maybe that's the difference in our genders showing there, Eric.
You see?
Perhaps, but you know what? When you're a male in high school in the 80s, come on. It's like you stay up late on HBO for a reason.
That's right. Hey, you better watch. I might have to sue you for harassment. If you take that
oh my!
Further, I'm traumatized.
Oh boy!
Oh, Steve made me do it.
Steve, are you still there?
Yes.
He's just looking back and forth going, I don't even know where to put anything. So I'll just look at my Want to Believe poster.
Do you like Romeo and Juliet, the movie, Steve? Have you seen it?
I have not seen it.
Oh, okay. Well, I would say you're missing out, but you're not really. So.
It's one movie I've actually seen. So I knew it when it came out. I was like, what?
It's okay.
Yeah, it's fine. And by the way, it was not handled in a creepy manner at all. It was an artistic movie.
No, it was tasteful.
I mean, it was Shakespeare, for God's sake. I mean, just think about this. So, Kristen, you study literature. The original cast would have been males doing it.
I know. And I think that's always like, it seems so bizarre. And I'm sure some people know the history behind that, but the reason for that, the reason why, for a long time, only men were doing theater, like in Shakespeare in Love, if you ever see that, it's a big controversy when a woman decides to start performing the theater, but they felt like the theater was actually for many, many years, for hundreds of years, it was believed that the theater was a really raunchy place and that only people with low morals, that there was something sleazy about it. And so the idea that you would put a woman on stage, that was considered sleazy and improper and everything. And so, yeah, it's interesting. Like when you see Shakespeare plays to imagine that the way that they were performed for their audiences, it was, Romeo and Juliet, both played by men.
Exactly. And it wasn't completely wrong because a lot of the quote theater stuff was kind of in the shadier, more dangerous part of town anyway.
Yeah.
So I think that over time they just said, oh, no, we've got an even more devious theater. So it's sort of normalized by certain elements getting worse and worse and worse. If that makes sense. So it's like, no, that's the bad theater over there. We're a more normal theater. But anyway, we went way off track.
I actually have a question for Steve. Sorry to not to hijack.
No, please.
Something I'm really wondering, and I bet a lot of people are. Can you give us any insight, Steve, on when we might actually get to trial based on the speed and the progression that we're going? Because I thought it was going to be this year, like maybe in the summer or the fall. Is that way off, or what's going on now, do you think?
I think Manson wins his motion to stay the Bianco case, and I think the anti-SLAPP stuff will be appealed when the judge makes the decision on that next month. And that leaves only the Jane Doe case as a possibility for this year. And
so you don't think Manson's lawsuit against Ilma and Evan is going to go to trial this year? No,
because the anti-SLAPP, either side that loses that motion can appeal right away.
Oh,
and if you're the defendants, if you're Wood and Gore and you lose and the judge, well, why wouldn't you appeal? Because I mean, you want to knock this out, and plus you want to slow it down. And if you're Manson and you lose, say, 2/3 of your case or half your case or whatever, you're also going to be tagged with attorney's fees. So you might appeal that. And if he doesn't, say he loses 100% and doesn't want to appeal so he can go forward, well, if he only loses 90%, they can still appeal part of it and stop this case. So I think it gets stopped after the judge issues her ruling, and that only leaves the one case open. But one thing I have been consistently wrong about, I've been right on some things, is saying there'll be a lull on these cases, because that has not happened. It keeps draining Lisa's PayPal account to buy documents. Stuff just keeps happening in this case.
But just to, and everybody should donate to Lisa. But just to be clear, I just want to make sure I heard you right. You're not saying that you think Manson's, his lawsuit against Evan and Ilma is gonna stop. You're just saying be stopped. You're just saying it's not going to happen this year. Am I understanding you?
Right. I think the judge will issue a decision on anti-SLAPP, and that'll be striking some part of Manson's lawsuit, but not all of it, because not even all of it is up to be struck, but some portion of it probably. And then whichever side or maybe both will appeal, and that'll slow it down for like a year.
Okay. So we got a much longer trip than I was.
Well, maybe. I don't know. I could see that. I was talking with them about it a little bit ago. I could see them settling it. You know, like, okay, if enough meat is going forward, again, Evan Rachel Wood, Westworld's done. You know, maybe it would be good for her, career and everything to move on, get it behind her and just go, especially if she keeps getting bloodied in the court of public opinion, because I feel like that tide has turned and it's really, really important. So if it's like, nobody's going to trial, but you still have this bad fact or bad accusation coming out and another and another and another, I think some of it's starting to stick on them. And I could be wrong, but it feels like that because I see the mainstream press is picking it up. Like Ashley Morgan Smith line and that case getting thrown out was huge for Manson, I feel, because it's everywhere. Lisa even commented about it, that it's got legs, that everyone's picking that story up, that it got tossed. I think people are shocked in the normal world.
And Smithline isn't known for anything. Like, she's not a celebrity. That's not even to be mean or anything, but she isn't known for anything. And just yesterday, how everything, there's so many, I couldn't keep up with all the news articles that came out to share for someone that most people don't know. So that was very interesting.
Agree. Now, I had another question. This has popped up while you were talking a minute ago, Steve. And it makes me think of Amber Heard. It makes me think of insurance. Now, Manson, I get the impression that Howard King, or at least Howard King's firm, has been Manson's lawyer for a long time, like potentially even decades. Because there's like quotes from King or other lawyers who are from King and Associates or whatever, like 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Is it possible that some of this is actually being covered through some kinds of insurance, especially when Manson did previously have to suffer a public problem with the whole Columbine situation. Like, is it possible that his label or somebody that there could be some sort of insurance helping him with at least the defense, maybe against Esme Bianco, or some parts of this?
Sorry, I know you asked Steve, and Steve can expound on this, but I just want to. I think yes is the answer. I don't want to say any more than that, but I think yes. But go ahead, Steve.
Well, and if that, because it's possible, right? Heard managed to get her stuff covered, right?
Right. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's nothing wrong with it. And insurance contracts are very bizarrely interpreted in the legal world and can cover things you wouldn't expect. So I don't know the answer to that. Certainly from his standpoint, you would hope for his pocketbook that it is. And also for settlement purposes, eventually that could contribute to that. These companies, if there's an insurance company, they don't have any emotional attachment to this. They want to stop it from going on, right? They want to stop spending money. So they would want to end this if they could. But I don't have any insight into that if he has an insurance company and he's allowed to have his counsel of choice, and that's Howard King. Other than I think Howard King is doing his firm is doing a good job at defending the guy, and it is certainly costing a lot of money.
Yeah, Howard King does come across as very competent. From what I've seen him, again, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know, but he seems like it, and I haven't heard anybody complaining about him very much. But this makes me a chat question I've had for a bit, and it's addressed to you, Colonel Kurtz, but it can also go to Lisa and it can go to Steve. Has Marilyn Manson been in touch with you to thank you for all your support regarding the case that's just been thrown out, or anything else?
Oh shit, I'm about to lose power. I'm sorry, I gotta go. No, I'm kidding. No, I mean, it's not a secret that I'm in contact with his wife, Lindsay, and that's the extent of it. And I think that there are reasons, on both sides for wanting to keep that distance. But
sure.
yeah, I talked to her, and I think that I know that they're grateful to not only me, but to Lisa and Steve and the others. And they do follow, I hope I'm not going out on a limb here to say this, but they do follow social media, and they do look at the YouTube videos and stuff like that, as I would if I were being falsely accused and there was this small corner of the internet that was speaking out for me, right? So there's nothing nefarious or shady about it. And so I think that I know that they are aware of what we're all doing and are grateful.
Awesome. And on that note, to brag on her a little bit, but we are pitching. Lisa's got a new YouTube channel. Somebody kind of famous is following Lisa on Instagram.
Woohoo. Now listen, as much as I don't want to disappoint my anti-Manson frenemies, I do not talk to Manson, Lindsay. Sorry, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. But yes, I'm followed, so bye.
So I guess my interaction on this is I got two distinguishing things, and one is I think I'm the only person in America who hasn't had a DM from or to Ashley Smithline.
Maybe that could be.
Make that clear. And then
she does like to talk.
Yeah, I haven't talked to anybody in this case, but I was contacted by the lawyers on both sides involving something in the case. So they do watch at least certain things on this. And Eric, real quick, I'd seen some comments earlier when we were talking about defamation law in California when you mentioned Depp coming to Virginia. I think it's because of the implication thing. I saw some people wanting us to mention that. Sorry, it's just been setting in my head there. So I did read what you guys said, and you're right on with that. So anyway, that's my involvement with the characters of this case.
Yeah, ironically, if he had waited a little bit, I think Manson would have been better off if he could suing Evan Rachel Wood in Tennessee. But that's just my opinion. I feel like, especially if you're trying to get to a jury trial, I think you might have better odds. California, I feel, is a bit more her backyard. Again, she's got a relationship with the state senate, for God's sake, and it is a one-party state. I'm sorry, but it is a pretty locked-in place, and she is in a very popular position there. So, I don't know, just my opinion. Like, if I were in Manson's shoes, I would want to be anywhere else in the nation, just like Johnny Depp was. He got lucky, I think, because of the Washington Post being out of the Virginia area.
And just imagine if that was never televised.
Ooh.
You see what I mean? Like, that's why I'm so pro getting this.
Everything should be.
Yeah, the Wood v. Gore for sure, because I know I've seen like this TikTok people are promoting from an attorney saying, well, he's not suing her, Evan, that is, for her allegations, which seems silly to me because we're likely going to expect that to play out in court. So it doesn't really matter if whatever he's suing him for. She's still being sued, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah.
So,
And it's like you said, stuff's gonna come out. So
it just seems like a little bit of a silly thing to point out, when in fact, just like the Johnny Depp trial, we saw everything play out. So I think, and I hope in this case that it does come out, or at least is televised, because I can't see or foresee that he would get that kind of vindication. And he has a harder hurdle due to his own image.
Oh, he's a terrible hurdle. I mean, okay, we could just look at the pattern of events that took place with the LASD and the DA's office kicking the can to each other because they don't want to deal with it. And Gaston's office following our own Colonel Kurtz here and then saying, oh, wait, no, never mind. We didn't do that. That was an error on the staff. And it's like, no, nobody wants to touch it. The only thing I've seen that's on that level is the whole Rust case in New Mexico.
Mm.
Oh, but did you know that took place October 20th, 2021? What? Oh, we're 14 months, no charges, folks. We did get the extra budget, no charges of any kind. How do I know this? I've covered it with 20 some odd episodes. But anyway, it's interesting. And I just don't think they want to deal with it at all.
Well, you mentioned the DA. Oh. You mentioned the DA saga.
Could you try again?
Was that me or you?
Oh, that was my watch.
Is that Alexa?
That was Siri.
Oh, I just want to say this is completely off track, but your Alexa or Siri reminded me of this. I really want to see the horror movie Megan. Have you seen the ads for that this weekend about this? It's like it's like this sort of horror comedy about this AI gone amok.
You got to see it.
It's getting great
Everybody's
reviews.
Have
you seen it?
No, I just want to watch it. I want to watch it right now.
Good. And it's gotten such great reviews. So anyway, but no, Eric, you mentioned the DA snafu. What was funny about that too is that they responded, or I guess his staffer responded to one of the posts that I put up, sort of almost kind of being taunting, and I said the DA is still following me despite blah blah blah. And so then she posts under this woman posts underneath it. She says, "Thanks for flagging this error." Oh man, I don't know. I still think that was really bizarre. I'm not sure what was going on there because, the DA's office, it doesn't follow random people. Like you looked at all the people they were following, it seemed to be following for a reason. And they sure kept that follow for a long time. I mean, it was like I think it was over a week that people were tagging them, and I was talking about them in videos that they were following me and stuff. So I'm not sure I totally buy that it was a mistake, but maybe it is. I don't know. I don't know what's going on in their head, honestly. Steve, do you have any thoughts as to where you think the LDA is on this whole mess?
Well, of course, we all know that the sheriff and the DA don't get along with each other. And therefore, the coordination with the investigation is pretty poor. And as Eric said, the can kicking back and forth. In my opinion, that's not fair to Manson. That's not fair to the accusers. And it's not fair to the public. I mean, you've done the search warrants. There's not going to be anything else. You've interviewed these people.
Right.
Make the decision. Charge the guy or don't charge the guy. So everybody has some finality with it. I think that's just poor performance by the DA's office. That's my opinion.
By the way, I like to add something of value anytime I can in a show, but LADA office. You do know there's a thing on Twitter called a list, and you can put anybody you want in a Twitter list, and they won't know if it's a private list, if you are following them or not following them, and you can get all of their tweets without any muss or fuss. So that is my public service message of the day, everyone. It's a new skill if you didn't know that.
Well, maybe that's what they meant to do.
Maybe.
And then oops, now it's too late because she kept going at him. But that was pretty funny.
All right, so let me see. We're on a tight timeline here today. So before I wrap up, what is the one thing I should have brought up as important, urgent, current news that I did not?
Oh, important, urgent, current. We've talked about most of it. I think, if anything, the fact that we have Ilma Gore's deposition from October, and that is available, like people can read it. I don't know, and maybe Steve can answer. I don't think it's the entirety. Like maybe there's more, but it looked complete. You know what I mean? It looked like a complete transcript. That also included exhibits. Some of them were redacted though, and some of them were from that broken iPad. So she was asked about some things, but again, Steve mentioned earlier, it was restricted to groupie. And what she did not answer, and the attorney kept saying for her not to answer, is when she dated Evan Rachel Wood. On top of that, she accidentally slips in this deposition at some point and brings up Evan's name as how she learned of groupie, even though in the beginning that's not how it went. So a lot of back and forth there. There also is, or there was, a deposition from Ashley Walters. We do know that happened. I don't know if we will see a transcript from that because I don't know if it's the protective order. There's something that usually gives a timeline if you don't want it out there. But I haven't seen anything, and I don't think that's in the time frame.
Okay,
So,
on that Ilma Gore bit you were just talking about, if I recall, Steve has a very good video, and you were actually impressed by her answer, if I recall, as to why she put out the garbage information about an underage person passing away in the making and blah, blah, blah. Is that easily found on your channel? Because I definitely want to throw traffic, to you there.
Yeah, I think I actually did that in the 1 minute short, but she has good lawyers, and so does Wood, in addition to Manson. So reading the briefs that they do is very interesting for me because these lawyers are talented. But her reply back to this from a legal standpoint was like, okay, because I thought, no, she's staying in this case. No way is she coming out of this. She has no chance. But I'm not saying she won it, but her lawyer's argument to me was pretty persuasive. I would call it a coin flip. Although her deposition, I didn't think went as well for her as I thought it would.
Okay, and to close out with you, Colonel Kurtz, somebody had a question, but I don't know if I can get it.
Oh,
There's
go ahead.
the question.
Oh,
Yep.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, they want to know, are you going to tell us any more about these massive interviews? Or you put out a little bit of a tweet and a picture that was sort of teasing that some things are coming.
Well, some things are definitely coming very soon. The big fish is it's being a little evasive, but I still think that it's gonna come through. But I do have another one that I'm very sure is gonna be happening soon. We're supposed to do it this weekend, or we're supposed to do it early next week. But anyway, I can't be more specific than that. But one of them is big. It's definitely going to happen this weekend. One of them is pretty gigantic, but they're being a little tricky, or circumstances are a little tricky. I still think it's going to happen. It's not Marilyn Manson. I know people were hoping for that. I don't think that Marilyn Manson is probably going to do an interview with anybody.
No, I don't think I think his lawyer would shoot him if he did. Lindsay might.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like both of them should probably stay away from interviews until all this stuff, legal stuff is resolved. But anyway, I wish I could tell you more, but you will find out. You will find out very soon, because these things are one of them is taking place in the next several days, and then the other one I'm hoping will happen like this week. So anyway, stay tuned.
How about our mutual friend Edwin? You were going to be doing something with him.
No, I have not really talked to Edwin since the interview we did that didn't go over too well with some people. Not because I have any issue with him, but I think that we both kind of got in a little bit of trouble for that, because I got in a little bit of trouble because I wasn't as confrontational, or maybe as prepared as people hoped I was. He got in some trouble because people thought that he was really attacking me hard or being difficult and all that. And when really, like, both of us like each other. We had a good time. And so anyway, so I have no issue with him. I'd love to do something with him again soon. Or if you have him on, join you guys or whatever.
Cool. Yeah, and I like Edwin. I mean, I had him on here, and I don't think it was a bad
I
thing.
think he's genuine. I just think that I think that maybe he's just he looks at things in a perspective. He looks at this case with a perspective at times that I don't share, and I don't necessarily think is the most logical way. But I don't think that he's one of these who's just out to be a troll or who just blindly hates Manson or whatever. So.
Right. And then on that note, I did reply to a tweet. You got in a conversation last night with a major, I guess we'd say anti-Manson account. I think it's called Manson is Abusive, something like that. And I did reply that I'd be happy to talk to the individual, and I would be happy to talk to any of the top quote anti-Manson accounts. And I'm not a mean person. I will happily talk to you and listen. I genuinely want to know. So I just want to put it out there. And if anybody knows anyone of that, please tag them, let them know. I am open to talk. I think everybody should.
There are some very thoughtful people on that side of the fence too. Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, I'm open to that, because if you can't steelman your own argument, you've got a problem.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and the account was Manson Infowars.
Which one?
Manson Infowars.
Oh, that's it. Okay. Sorry.
I only know because someone sent it to me, and I'm like, oh, that would be cool.
Okay. Well, yes. Again, so I'm just putting out there verbally. I'm happy to talk to Manson Infowars, or any of the bigger ones, whatever. I'm open, and it doesn't have to be a fight. I mean, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in getting the chat up. None of that. And if you don't believe me, I had Edwin on. Please look it up. I think it went well. We continue to talk. We get along just fine.
Yeah, that was a good show.
Yeah, that was a good show. So he should come on again.
I actually invited him today.
You could
I just don't think he's around.
That would have been a fun
it's
show.
Holidays and oh no, it would be. I mean, especially because we're playing catch up, and it's like, then I could tease him. I'd be like, so what do you think, Edwin? What do you think? Well, here's some more facts. What do you think, Edwin? What do you think?
You gonna wish Manson a happy birthday, Edwin?
Well,
Sorry.
and there we go. We'll close on that. Happy birthday, Marilyn Manson. And everybody, thank you so much. You can find Steve at Southern Law on YouTube, and he's Colonel of Wisdom on Twitter. Colonel Kurtz, you can find as
a different
Colonel.
A different spelling of Colonel.
It still cracks me up because I was in the Army, and I'm always having to get over that.
It's weird. I know.
Oh, I never caught that on either. Okay, I gotcha.
And then Lisa from the Manson Cases, and you are the Manson Cases on Instagram, Twitter, now YouTube. And I hope people have been going over and subscribing to her, because if you subscribe, you can get the notifications, and then when she drops the episode, you'll know. And on that note, everybody, thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Thank you,
Good
Eric.
night, guys.